never want to stay here a day longer than I'm supposed to. So every year, I'm like, help me know when my time is up. Is there enough of a foundation? If I were to leave, you'd be fine, because the next person is going to take this into an even bigger and better place. And so trying to not allow it to become me focused and allow it to really be more cause focused.
One of the top regrets people have at the end of their life is wishing that they went after their purpose in life. But we don't want that to be you. And that's why we have a special guest today to talk to us about legacy. This is Million Dollar Destiny, where we talk about money, wealth, and legacy through the kingdom perspective. And today we do want to talk to someone who has walked the journey of what it is to now be a CEO of an organization based in LA, helping to bridge the gap between the topic that's actually very divisive and polarizing. And she found a way to be the bridge, to gap the bridge between two groups. And it's absolutely astounding to me that she could do that in this lifetime. Now, the reason also that we are having this show with her today is we want to talk about being the change, building a legacy, uniting people, even if they are coming from different perspectives, and some organizational tips. Because I know, even myself, when we get a big vision from God, knowing that we came here to do something so specific and special that you were created to do, it can feel daunting. And instead of letting you feel stunted, stopped, and stuck, that's why I brought Talitha Phillips here today to talk to us, to share not only organizationally from a CEO perspective, because she wasn't always a CEO, and you're going to meet her in just a second, and I'll tell you all about who she is so that she can start to tell us how she got to where she is so you can too. That's the whole goal of this episode. Now, let's bring her on. Hey, Talitha.
Hi.
Thank
Thanks
you
for having
so
me.
much. Oh my gosh. I'm
Yeah.
really, really looking forward to this. Everyone, this is Talitha Phillips. So I know that you are the CEO now, but you started with Claire's Health. It's LA based. Now it's expanded, but when you started at age 23, they only had $90,000 for an annual budget. And you were there from that point to help see it transform. And you played a really large part in creating models that worked to spread it out to now having a medical clinic serving people with a budget of 2.3 million a year. Wow, that is awesome. I can't wait to learn from you. And I know the audience can't wait to learn, because we all know that we have a burning desire, that we see a vision, that God created us to do something special, but we may not know how, and it can feel so daunting. So thank you for taking the time today. You're a busy lady. You're a mom of two girls. You have a large, what is it, a cockerdoodle? I don't remember. What is it called? A labradoodle.
Labradoodle.
And then you catch babies too, and you're just so passionate, full of life, making a difference in this world. And it's like you're always going. So thank you for taking a pause just to come and share your message with us today.
Thank you. No, it's
Yeah.
amazing to be here. I love it.
Awesome. Okay, so I have some questions for you. I know that you are leading the charge in a very controversial space around sexual and reproductive health. When you first started, when you were 23, what was the climate like back then? And what is it like today? Is it so different?
Yeah, gosh, that's a good first question. I'm already stumped. No, I'm
I
kidding.
totally caught you off guard with
Yeah.
that one.
No, it's great. I think in a lot of ways, I think the climate was probably similar, right? If you take an issue like women's health or reproductive health, there's always been sides. I think when I first started, the mindset was you pick a side and then you champion that side. But the more you start to focus on people, the people who are actually on the other end of all these issues, you start to quickly realize that these are complex issues, that these are issues that affect entire families. And so I feel like my journey has been a little bit of just starting to understand that these are nuanced issues that require a very personalized, compassionate, empathetic approach. And in doing that, you do start to find a lot of common ground, a lot more common ground than maybe I thought there was when I started 23, almost 24 years ago.
Wow. And back then, when it was a smaller budget and organization, what were you guys doing back then?
Yeah, very basic services. So I think what I love about sort of the history of Claris is that the heart has always been, let's be there for people in these really tough, challenging situations. So Claris means clarity. And I think that's always been our goal. But at that time, all we could really do was present options. So basic, counseling or peer advocacy. We had some parenting classes. We had like an after abortion support group. That's actually how I first learned about the organization. But everything was somewhat small. I mean, I was hired as the director, but it was like 20 hours a week. So we had two very part-time employees with a lot of vision. There always was this big vision. It was just, how do we achieve that? How do we get there?
I love it. I love it because I feel like part of this conversation is about that. How do you go from having such a big vision and chunking it down? And do you pivot? Do you stay hooked on what that grand vision is and not give up? Now that you've had the longevity of the time inside of the organization and you've really helped it develop to where it is now as the CEO, I am so interested to see what that journey was like. Is today what the original big vision was?
They hired me. I was, 23. I had lived experience. I think they thought at the time, she's young, she's passionate, she's lived through this. I did not want to work there. I mean, this was not my dream job. I actually ran. I mean, my story is so unconventional where I was like, this is the last thing I wanted to do.
Right.
I come from a family of three brothers. So like women's issues. I mean, this was so not what I wanted to do with my life, but there was a sort of surrendering process of saying, okay, I do care about this organization. I've experienced personally the impact it can have on a life, how it can change your life. And so sure, I'll give it a try. I mean, it was part-time and I became a doula at the same time. So hopefully I'm not catching babies. If I'm catching babies, then something has gone wrong, but I'm definitely helping babies be born. And I've always done both. But I think at the time, the biggest vision we had was, let's become a licensed medical clinic. I think we could serve a lot better if we became a licensed clinic. And we have achieved that. Where we've extended is realizing it's not just about caring physically for someone, right? So the medical licensing, and now we have multiple clinics and a mobile clinic, and all of that is great. But your physical health is only one tiny part of you, right? And it's that comprehensive, the holistic. You are not just a body, right? You are a soul, a mind. And so thinking about more of the physical, emotional, and when possible, if somebody is open to it, spiritual aspect of them as a human being, and addressing all of those in a way that just bathes them with compassion and love, and says, hey, look, we understand where you are and how can we, journey with you, instead of saying this is what you should do. That's not what it's about at all. It's, helping people make decisions for themselves that they are then going to live out. So our mission now, the three key words that I love in our mission statement are before, during, and after. And I think that is potentially where people can sort of insert that, like, these are decisions that, you can be there for someone before they make these or face these decisions. Hopefully you can prevent some difficult, challenging moments in their life, then being there during these. And then the after is so key, right? Like, it's not, somebody chooses to have a child, you want to make sure that child is brought into a healthy home, healthy family. And if they choose adoption, there's support that's needed. If they choose abortion, there's still so much support that is needed for that person after they make these choices. So that's where we come in.
That's amazing. That's amazing because I feel like you guys really do sit in the middle and have supporters that come from both sides. So if we talk about opposition, division, polarization, why is this such a hot topic? Why is it so inflammatory? And how did you become a mentor basically to this category of nonprofits in a way and leading the charge as a model? How did you do that?
Probably, I don't know. I wish I had a formula, right? I mean, I think one thing about being a young director, starting at 23, was I was just a sponge. I was just absorbing. And then we're in a city like Los Angeles, which is, urban, so much cutting edge in a lot of ways. And so I think just listening to the people we were serving, my gosh, their needs are so much bigger than what we can meet. I think where the polarization comes in is that if you look at let's just call them extremes, right? So the extreme mindsets, or what we think each one is if you're on one side, then the baby's life matters the most. And if you're on the other side, the woman's life matters the most. And so, you're pitting, what we're really doing in the polarization is we're pitting women against children. And I think that is something that became very clear to me. And this is just, in the reproductive health space, right? So there's other polarization issues, polarizing issues like adoption and abortion, all that. But if you just took that one thing, that really bothered me, because I saw people on both sides who cared very deeply about women and children, who cared very deeply about families. And so what I started to notice is they were really just aligning themselves with an ideology. But if you could sort of erase the labels and just let people talk, there's so much more common ground. And so I think one of the things that we learned is messaging, and how important messaging is. Now, it does put you sort of in the middle, and a lot of people don't like that. Like, we get a lot of criticism. People want you to pick a side. They would much rather you be an extreme, because when you're an extreme, you speak one language and you just pull all the support from that side. It's much harder to gather people together in the middle. And so I think we just decided it was more important to be super transparent and focus on the lives behind the issues, regardless of who that may have offended, or, and then we started quickly realizing there are a lot of people who feel this way. There's a lot of people who agree and who don't want to pick a side. They just feel shoved in a box, and nobody wants that.
And I think being a leader is having the confidence to stand in the truth that is what you believe in. And all of a sudden, you create the space for other people to say, yeah, me too, and that you're giving that voice and that permission for others to say, you know what, I have that same belief system. I don't want to be shoved into a box. And what I hear from what you're saying is that you really focused on loving the person and the family. And rather than focusing on any labels that so many things come with, too many strings attached to it, you're being led by the conversation and the needs of the people. Client led, I believe, is one of your philosophies, right? So what are
Yeah.
some of the
Yeah. It's one of our pillars.
philosophies? Yeah, what are your pillars? I think there's 4.
Oh yeah. You're going to put me to the test. You're like, how will I
Oh!
remember that?
I can read it. You have it right here.
Yeah. Well, let me start with client led or patient led. I mean, I think our first pillar is really, that if you walk into one of our facilities, that you guide the discussion. And so we have a very, not formulaic in the sense that it's rigid, but we have, some paperwork where the client tells us why they're there, how we can serve them. And so we're just mirroring what they're saying to us. So that's really important, that they don't feel like they're being talked at, but that they really are the one guiding them. They're asking for the resources. They're being presented options that they lead. The second is that we're family centric. So I think back to the polarization, is that this issue, I think the disservice we have done to women who are in these situations is we've said to them, this is all on you, right? Like, you have to make this decision. And while that sounds right, like if you're for women's rights, right? Like that term in itself, right? What that actually communicates so often to women is, this is on you and you're alone. And so we specifically realize that we hope that she's never alone. And so asking questions like, who else is important to this decision making, inviting them into the conversation. There are a lot of clinics, women's health clinics, where the partners are left in the waiting room. They're not allowed in. Well, if she gives us consent, we allow them to be a part of the visit as well, because we realize these are decisions that affect more than just her. And so we want her to have a community of support. So patient led, client led, family centric, and then fully informed choice. Like, our big one thing we really believe is that you do need to feel like you have choices, and not just one choice. Whether you feel like you can't have a baby and you have to place the baby for adoption, we don't believe that is a great choice either, right? Like, if somebody chooses adoption, you want them to choose that because they've chosen to place their child in a family. Abortion, same thing. You don't want anyone to feel like that's their only option. So when you feel like you only have one option, you often later regret that decision. And so knowing, or even parenting, like, do you feel like you have to do this alone? Do you feel like you have to be a single parent? Or so really sort of spelling those things. So, and then the fourth one, like, will you want to remind me what our fourth
Is
one
the
was?
integrated whole person care.
Integrated care. Yes, I would have probably gotten there. Yes, integrated care. We talked about physical and emotional, that this isn't just, so if you walk into our clinic, for example, and you are coming for, let's say you're coming for a medical service, an STD test or a pregnancy test, you are not just presented that, you are presented an opportunity where someone will say, how are you doing? How are you feeling about this? You suddenly are aware of all the resources that we offer beyond therapy services, for example. So often someone will walk in and we'll discover there's a history. Maybe there's a history of sexual abuse or domestic violence, or they need resources. Like they're there because they think they might be pregnant, but they need housing. And so to just sit down and have somebody say, yes, you came here for this physical need, but we're also going to help you address all these other needs in your life.
I love it. It's so loving. They're just coming into a container where it's like they can finally exhale and relax into the care of someone who can just, at least for that moment, lead the way for a bit and give them guidance and resources. And so does that mean that you have partnerships or like places that you can send them to, just so that you have, it sounds like a very holistic approach where you're looking at the person and really listening to their needs and asking the leading questions to get them to see, like, wait a minute, I do need this and that. And then now you can come and offer in more resources that whether you or other organizations can offer. So how important is it, do you think, to the success of your mission or what you're standing for, to have a network of other providers?
You hit the nail on the head. I mean, I think this is something that became so important to us about maybe 7 or 8 years ago. So important that we actually hired a person and said, we're going to make this a position. And it's our community engagement arm of Claris. And we now have over 320 partnerships in the LA area, where some of them are really tight, some of them are a little more loose, but it's just maintaining these partnerships. So if somebody comes in and says, I need a place to live, it's not, here's a sheet of all the places you can go. It is a warm handoff of, we're going to make a phone call. We now actually get calls all over the city from organizations, churches, and other organizations that will say somebody walked in and they need housing. Oh, call Claris because they have a pulse on what's available. So if somebody comes into us, like we just got a call, for example, we got a call from a hospital last week, and there was an entire family that, a baby had just been born, didn't have anywhere to stay. We made a phone call to the Dream Center, and this family was able to be housed. That doesn't happen without relationships, right? Calling, I love that we have 211. You can pick up the phone and 211 will give you resources, but they're not going to say, let's go call, I'm going to call my friend at the Alcoholism Center for Women, or, here, and actually help tell the story and help bridge the gap. And that's the case for housing, for mental health service, additional mental health services, substance abuse. I mean, the partnerships span pretty significantly. And then we took it one step further, where we discovered that sometimes people will walk into, let's say, a shelter, one of a rescue mission or a shelter, and they're pregnant and they can't house them. And so one trend we saw very unintentionally was, somebody would come in and they would have to say, I'm sorry, we can't house you because you're pregnant, not realizing that the message that has been sent is, okay, the pregnancy is the problem, right? Like, if you get rid of the pregnancy, we can house you. And so we started noticing, and this was a trend beyond the housing, just like, oh, I'm sorry, because you're pregnant, you can't access these services. So we started training other organizations in how to see pregnancy as this beautiful, unique moment in someone's life. And instead of saying, we can't help you, saying, okay, let's pause. What are some questions you can ask them in that moment where they don't feel as if this pregnancy is the problem? And then you can connect them to resources. So we've spent the last 2 years offering trainings. I think we've trained over 200 people. And this is extended outside of Los Angeles. We've done training in Florida, we've done some training in Texas, and just really helping people see that this pregnancy could be, for example, if somebody's entering a substance abuse treatment facility, often the pregnancy is seen as a problem, but that pregnancy is what often actually motivates them to stay or to become sober, because for this brief moment, life is about more than just them, right? And so seeing that, just changing the narrative, instead of, oh no, this is a problem, like, how do you feel about this? How can I help you? What do you need? Those simple questions allow them to feel like there could be hope in the situation. And again, clarity, bringing clarity what we're so
That is
about.
so cool. What I'm seeing a consistent thread through everything you're talking about. The topic may be different, but the consistency that I'm seeing is finding common ground by listening really well. And then what's this other thread is the narrative. It's the messaging. And that's how you're able to communicate something and kind of give it a new perspective, like turning the crystal to see the facet from another angle. And now all of a sudden everyone's like, oh yeah, actually we want the same thing. Even going back to the whether it's just loving the baby or loving the mom, it's about love. And so people get
Hmm.
really fired up about standing up for their beliefs, but at the end, if they can just turn it and look at it from the other facet and realize we're fighting for the same thing in a way. And I think you giving them that ability to have a new fresh perspective, a different messaging and languaging gives them the permission to exit the label that bound them to a certain characteristic or behavior or personality they thought they had to be. Wow, that just came to me, but it's just liberating what you're doing.
No, I think you explained it so well, especially just even hearing the thread, because that's maybe not something I would have thought of, but you're right, it is. And it is I think liberating is such a beautiful word because it's a moment where you personally feel it. The old school word was empowered, but then that word became like everyone uses that, right? But
Yeah.
liberate or free, you feel free. And that burden, like you said, to exhale. I
Hmm.
love that you use that word. That's something that we find. In fact, sometimes people in our lobby, I'll walk out there and I'm like, wow, they've exhaled so much. Like somebody's laying on the couch. They're so relaxed. Oh, I like it here. It's so peaceful. And that's what we want. We want you to walk in and feel like, oh gosh, these people thought about me before I walked in here. I
Yeah.
can just take a deep breath, let it all go. Um, and for this moment, you know, you don't have to worry about all the things that are storming. One of the things I ask people, my favorite question in these sort of challenging moments, if somebody's facing a difficult situation, is I'll say to them, if you could silence all the voices in your head, what would you do?
Mm.
And usually there's this long pause because no one is saying in that moment, like, what would you do? Because what we often hear is, well, my mom wants me to do, or my boyfriend, or my sister, or my dad, or but then if all of those voices are in your head, and I understand, what if you silence them for a moment and just ask yourself, what is it that you want to do? That is liberating
That's
in that moment.
moving. Like that makes me want to cry tears because it's like the first time in a long time that maybe even the first time that person had an opportunity in the midst of that potentially traumatic experience to just be seen and heard and held and permission again to just hear themselves and what is it there for them. That's huge. That alone, a person can come into a space and be completely shifted and have this energetic, mental, emotional shift because someone loved them and thought about them before they came. And, I looked at the stats. It's like, it's way too common what women have to go through. And just not knowing that there are options, right? You talked about that, just like letting them know that they have a choice. And whatever the choice is, you're going to love them anyway. I came to your beautiful gala fundraiser last year and I got to see the beautiful storytelling videos that you've put together, see all the stories of the people who are
Mm-hmm.
actually experiencing what we're describing here today. And so everyone at the end of this, stay to the end because I'm going to put down also in the show notes how you can stay in contact with Claire's Health so you can be invited to come to the next fundraiser and support. If you like what you're hearing and you're gaining value from this, come and support with your dollars. We want to vote with our dollars towards projects and organizations that are making a difference. And this is not just helping people today, that one mom or mom and dad, in a very potentially it is overwhelming when you feel you're backed into a corner and you don't have a choice and you come into this space. It's like, yes, that is life changing for her and him, but then the baby, if she chooses to keep it. And then the generational impact that we won't even know because it's just going to keep rippling out. That is amazing. That is what all of us want to be a part of, whether you see yourself as a CEO who can be a founder of an organization, but that's not the only way to make a difference, right, Talitha? I mean, what would you say to someone who feels the pressure to make a difference, but just doesn't know what to do?
It's interesting because I think sometimes I hear people say, well, that's great that you get to do this. You get to do this full time. Like this is job, and every day you see the difference you're making, which by the way is not true. I mean, it's not every day, right? Like being a CEO is so not glamorous. I mean, my children are always like, "Ooh, I don't ever want to be a CEO," because they're in the back seat. They hear all the things, the calls at, midnight, or the vacations that never really happen because you're interrupted all the time because a mirror pops off the mobile clinic, or, whatever, the generator stops working, or the toilet broke, or, all the things that are not glamorous. But then it's those moments where you come to the gala, like you said, and you sit in the back. And I'll have to give you the YouTube link too, because you can watch some of these videos, and they are, I mean, incredible. But I think just like those stories don't have a beginning and an end, and tie a bow on it, that's how all of our lives are. And so whoever you are, you have an opportunity to make a difference in your area, every single day. And it may not be, this big, life changing moment that turns into a YouTube video, but it does, help the community that you are around. So I would say, especially if you're in a career or looking for a career that isn't a nonprofit, or isn't one that is necessarily focused, you can volunteer, you can pay attention to the world around you. I mean, I think even, going to the grocery store and somebody's outside with a sign, right? Like every time I see a sign that says pregnant and need help, I'm like, oh my gosh, let's go talk to, how, instead of just giving you money, like what is it that you need, right? And all those interactions don't always go the way we want, but at least you're noticing the world around you, or finding a nonprofit, figuring out if it's children that you're passionate about. Maybe it's foster care, finding ways that you can be involved in a small way or a big way. I mean, every nonprofit needs volunteers. So if you have time, call and just get involved. And I think it's just the idea of getting outside of ourselves. There, years ago, actually in our pregnancy loss support group, there's one area or one section that talks about depression. And one of the definitions of depression is eyes turned inward. And I love that so much because it's such a visual reminder of what happens to us when our eyes are so focused on us. And one of the ways that we overcome is by getting our eyes off of ourselves and onto the world around us. And I think as a parent, we should be modeling this for our kids. And we all fail in many ways in this, but I think just, yeah, getting out. And even if it's just small things, just do the little things, and maybe something big will come up at some point. But just keep your eyes focused on the community that needs you, that God's called you to, wherever you are.
I love it. Thank you for that word of wisdom and encouragement. All right, guys, don't go away. We're going to be right back after this little break.
Claris Health. We're meeting you wherever you are. Whether it's pregnancy, sexual health, or mental health, we're here for you. You are not alone. Our mission is to equip and care for individuals and their families before, during, and after pregnancy and sexual health choices. All services are either free or low cost. Call or text us at 323-553-5333. Book an appointment. We're here to help.
Did you know that I have a nonprofit serving women and children leaving abuse? Wings to Fly Foundation is helping women with housing, healing, and help so they can be liberated to fulfill their destiny. Go to Million Dollar Destiny TV and click on philanthropy to see more. Welcome back, everybody. We are talking to Talitha Phillips, the CEO of Claris Health. She's awesome. What a great conversation. I hope you guys are leaning in, taking notes, because this next section now, we're going to talk about a few different things. One of them is going to be diving into organizationally, how do you run a nonprofit organization? Especially Talitha's been able to go from the beginning stages where it was a $90,000 a year budget to now $2.3 million budget, and they've got a big project coming that we'll talk about too, is an organization grows. What are some things, like for instance, like what are some of the biggest challenges you've experienced here, and how did you approach overcoming it?
So many different directions I could take this answer. And I think the obvious answer is just some of the leadership challenges, right? You're leading an organization with a very small team. We're very lean. We've always been very lean, not just budget wise, but also staffing. And there's challenges in that. We don't have big departments. We don't have big fundraising departments. We don't have a fundraising department, or we don't have marketing. We don't have HR. So there's a lot of things that you're taking on. I think the biggest challenge is more for me personally, which is I'm a very justice minded person. It's my personality. And, you can't win over everyone. And I think the having to sit with, never going to convince Yelp that they're wrong about how they've labeled us, right? Like It's just infuriating to me that there are certain people who just will not hear who you really are and force you to stay in a label, or not ever going to, maybe win over some people who on the other side, there's never like, there's Yelp has labeled us something that we are not. And then there's this other very pro-life organization that has labeled us as something we are not, that is causing us so many issues. And both of them, to give you an example, so I'll actually name them because I've written about this, but it's Heartbeat International and Yelp. And at Yelp, there's others I could throw in that bucket. But neither of them refuse, and they know they're causing us harm, and they just refuse. They don't care. So I think that one of the biggest challenges to me is, how do you just have to let it happen, and you just have to put your head down and move forward and do what you do with conviction. I think that is one of the biggest challenges to me. I mean, it has caused so many hours. I mean, example, just grant foundations, right? So we're receiving grant funding, and then somebody from the foundation Googled us and was like, wait a second, help says you're this. And then there's, and just, yes, and they're both wrong. And then, yes, we've hired lawyers, and yes, and the number of hours that it took me to convince this foundation that we are who we are. And thankfully, in this case, I won them over. But how many times have we not even had the opportunity to plead our case? So we've lost funding, we've lost, it damages your reputation. And I think that's some of the challenges. It would be so much easier if I could just say, sure, we are who you think we are. We are who you think we are. So I would say it is a little more uncomfortable to be who we are. I think that the justice mindset then is like, no, but I do believe we are who we're supposed to be. So we'll just have to keep doing this, so.
That's the leading edge that you're providing and carving the path out for, because this is kind of like the meta, or just another piece of that conversation of labeling and liberating women, the family, from feeling like they have to take on the strings attached to a label, and liberating them. And I think as leaders, or an organization who is leading the charge, it kind of comes with the territory, I think, to be fitted by people who just don't want to agree with that because it's so foreign, or you don't fit in a box and they need you to. And if they have bigger dollars or a bit that you depend on to run your business, or can see why it would be infuriating. Finally coming to that place of like realizing you are in the right place because you're attracting supporters from both sides, and that you are the bridge. I think that just is proof to me again that as are on the right track, have all that opposition.
And I think, from a political standpoint, if you think about it, and I think something I've had to realize is both of those groups are just using us for their own gain, right? Like it only is to benefit them. Like they know it's hurting us and they don't care. Christian, non-Christian, they don't care. They're both using us. And that is how so many women feel. And I think, experience an unintended pregnancy when I was in college, and I remember feeling just trapped, right? Like it didn't really matter at that moment language I had heard in that moment. I felt like I've made this huge mistake and I need out. And so I think taking that, we're having this big discussion, but at the heart of it are these women who also feel like they're just being used for this political discussion, right? Or this rhetoric. But had somebody sat me down and said, hey, what do you want to do? I mean, nobody asked me that. I went to one organization and they were like, schedule your abortion tomorrow. Other organization, how dare you think of abortion? And in the middle of it, I'm like, can somebody just help me? And I think that's why exhale is so important. Hey, you are a valuable person, and you still have a bright future ahead of you. And I think that just shifts everything, because that's not what you get. If you walk into a place and you feel like they just want my money, they want me to make a decision because it's going to profit them, or they want me to make a decision because they believe it's right, it doesn't help her, because she has to walk out and live her life with the decision that she makes. So
There you go. That's the truth. I had the same story in university. Didn't even know that there was another option. And for me, it was because it was culturally ingrained. And so there's that too.
yeah.
And just the voices in the head of what you should and shouldn't do, rather than giving that person an opportunity to discover for themselves. Thankfully now, both of us have been blessed with daughters. How did you end up at this organization? Because you mentioned earlier that, this is not where you would have chosen. And then here you are all these years later. How did you wind up there, and why did you stay?
Yeah. So funny-ish story. So I ended up having an abortion in college, and then honestly vowed to just hate myself for the rest of my life. And actually this, we were talking about the challenges. One of the challenges is, somebody recently just made a comment online about me and said, how dare she say that she, is neutral in this when she has a personal story that she, very much regrets. And so then they were attacking Clarice because of my personal story. And I thought, oh my gosh, you can't win here. But the reality is I had an abortion, was on this very self-destructive path when I heard about Clarice, and I heard that they had a group for young women or older women like me. And I finally got the courage and I went through this group. It was this 10-week support group, changed my life, and thought, okay, I'm going to graduate college and I'm going to go on. And dad wanted me to be a lawyer and had, big plans. And they just kept coming. I kept running into the women on the board at Claris, and they said, we really feel like this is what you're supposed to do. And I remember one woman, I ran into her somewhere and she said, are you just making this decision on your own, or have you actually ever even prayed about this? And it was this moment of like, nope, have not prayed because I don't want to do this. And so I remember, and honestly, my prayer was something like, if you're going to make me do this, God, then you better make it abundantly clear, just this very like stubborn, and I got a call within a few days from Chuck Norris, the actor, his family, Walker, Texas Ranger. They were having twins and they needed somebody to work nights with their babies. And I had been recommended, I knew the family at the time through other family members. And so ended up saying, well, if I take that night job working for them, then I have to have a part-time day job, which is what Claris was. And my other job was full-time. So my abundantly clear answer came very swiftly. And I remember on my first day, so they didn't have a director in the role for about a year. They had somebody just helping out part-time. My first day, I just remember sitting on the floor, just wanting to cry. What have I done? They were in the middle of this project. It was like, we're getting this newsletter out. And there were all these seeds, like packets of seeds. And I'm like, I'm stuck in hell with these seeds. And I don't know what I'm doing. And it took being in front of people. I mean, at the time there were just two of us, and then hearing the stories and realizing, oh my gosh, I understand what you're going through. And I know it's like slowly I understood the women who had been through what I'd been through, but then it was like, oh wait, we could help people never have to be in this situation. And what if we did this? And what if we, and it's like the passion just grew. And I think because I do have three brothers, and I realized like, this is not a women's issue, right? Like this is a human issue. This is a family issue. And so being able to say, we need to reach them. We need to be there for these men. We need to be there for these future children. And now, like you said, now raising daughters, I have a 16-year-old, which is terrifying. Honestly, I thought I'd have boys, and I was like fine with having all boys, and somehow I have two girls. But I'm walking through this with her, and I've thought so many times, like, gosh, what if it were her? Like, would she feel comfortable enough coming to me? Because I definitely didn't feel comfortable going to my parents. I was terrified. I knew I had let them down. And so I think, everything changes. Perspective changes when suddenly you're looking, going, gosh, am I making the same mistakes? How do I infuse this into my kids that no matter what they do, I will always love them? I may not be happy about everything they do, but I will always, my love for them is not conditional. And so I don't know if I'm doing that right, but here we are.
Here we are. I think when we focus on love, we can only do our best. We are fallible humans, and all we can do is our best. And I see that your essence of how you describe loving your child or your children, that essence is really felt in this whole conversation as you're telling me about the threads that make up this organization. And I think that that is something to be really proud of. That to me is legacy, but there's so many ways to look at legacy. Sometimes people see it as monetary, material, a project, but how do you look at it? Your thoughts on legacy?
So we have a funny saying, or maybe not funny, but I talk about the getting hit by the bus theory. Like, what happens if I get hit by the bus today? So I'm in the leadership group, and they're always like, Talitha and her bus, like getting hit by the bus. But I always think two things. One is, I've always said I never want to stay here a day longer than I'm supposed to. So every year, I'm like, help me know when my time is up, because I've met CEOs who should have left long before, and I never want this to just feel like a job, right? It really has to feel like a calling. So that, and then what happens if I were to get hit by the bus tomorrow? Like, is there enough of a foundation? Like, I think I always get really nervous when they say, well, if Talitha ever were to leave, and I'm like, you guys, if I were to leave, you'd be fine, because the next person is going to take this into an even bigger and better place than where it's come from. And so trying to not allow it to become me focused and allow it to really be more cause focused. And some of that is also, I think I see a legacy in our donors of saying, look, during COVID, so many people moved, and they left California. And, there's this, sure, you can run around and try to convince people to keep giving money to you, or you can say, look, I hope that people care so much about the work that we do that now that they're in Nashville or now that they're in Texas or Florida, wherever the heck they are, that they go, okay, I need to find a place locally that is doing something similar because I care about the work, not Claris. And yes, sure, I love if they keep giving to us, but we're not controlling our donors, right? That there is enough money in this world for people to do all these things, and there's new people coming in. And so I think that's a little bit of the legacy too of, I don't want to create these little Claris robots. I want to create these people who say, I love women, I love children, I love adoption, I love post-abortion care, I love, options counseling, that then they'll just say, okay, who's doing that in my world? And if they're not, let's start something, make something happen.
Awesome. I have two questions on my mind that are fighting to come out. And one is, when you were, just back to that previous topic, when you were starting out and like not really wanting to be there and not realizing that this was a calling, what was the turning point? You said it slowly turned into a passion. Did you have a moment where you're like, oh yeah, this is like what I'm supposed to be doing?
Yeah, I think I did. I mean, I was trying to think, was there a moment? I think I made so many mistakes, and I think learning from those mistakes, but then seeing the lives, I can think like faces pop in my head of the people who have helped, who have stayed. Some of my best friends to this day are people who've been connected to Claire. So I think there are those moments of when somebody says to you, I can't imagine what my life would be like had I not come here. Or you see these victories, like we launched a clinic in South LA, and there's just those moments of, oh, this is so great. I'm so happy that I did this. And those are the confirmation moments of, we're actually supposed to be here and doing this. Or somebody says, like even you, like, oh, there's this string, that I'm like, oh, that's kind of cool. Maybe I was a part of that. I was a part of something so much bigger than me. I think that's when you start to realize, like, this is definitely, and there's a lot of, not everyone that has worked at Claris this is not everyone's passion or calling, right? And that's okay. I think, the fact that I've stayed, even though so many people have come and gone, is you start to realize, like, yeah, I really do feel like this probably is much more of a calling to me than it is to a lot of others.
You know what I saw was the passing of the baton. Some founders started this and then you joined, and then now you're the CEO, and eventually you're talking about basically seceding, right? Because we all have an expiration date on the planet, and creating it so that it's so focused on the mission and the legacy of what it's going to do after we're gone. I love the idea that the next person's going to take it to the next level, because you did that. You did that when you took the baton. And it's such a healthy growth perspective as well, to have that woven into the expectations for whoever's there. And then also, people coming and going, I think that is fine, because we need volunteers, for even if they're employees, to come and contribute. Everybody wants to know that they made a difference in some big or small way. And not everybody wants to play it big. And I don't think they have to. I think just go and test the waters. And maybe, I know, talked about, did you say that the definition of depression is eyes turned inward? Is that actually a definition?
Oh, I think it's a definition. I don't know that it's
Okay.
the definition,
Okay.
but
It was
yeah.
a definition. No, no, no. Well, I love that, because when I used to
Clarity.
get really maybe like a tough season and feeling depressed, I would always go and volunteer. And for that reason, I didn't know that it was like definition you shared, but I knew that by giving to someone else and focusing on them, it was going to help me feel better. And it certainly works. So it doesn't matter what role someone plays, just definitely go out and be part of the community and give back, pay attention, even opening the door for someone, or giving a smile, or asking someone, how are you, at the cashier, and mean it. Man, it's that matters. We were talking about, donors moving away, and I love your philosophy, because it's not about controlling them. You would rather them find something local similar to perpetuate that mission. But as an organization that's a nonprofit, how do you plan for sustainability?
I have an incredible board and finance committee, and I've been so blessed in just having people who are there to support, who are much smarter than I am, especially when it comes to this. But I think financial transparency and sustainability is a huge, we have one of our core values is integrity. And we really do look from a financial perspective. Like we hired a top auditor, nonprofit auditor in California and said, okay, we're going to go with the guy that's going to make this the hardest on us, and through it, there are times that I'm like, why did we do this? But it is so important to us. And I think just being very careful, having this mindset of like, this isn't our money, right? And so just being very cautious and careful with that. But, I think part of it is that we don't get government funding. And so everything, almost every single dollar raised is from individual support. We have very small reimbursement through Medi-Cal. That's less than 1% of our budget. So it's very small foundational grants. So while that's hard, it also gives us the freedom to run programs the way we want to run them and not just creating programs to get funding. So I think that's a big part of it. And then trying to, grow the number of people who give monthly, because that is just guaranteed income. So there are the people who sort of keep the lights on. We call them clarity makers, the people who just commit to supporting every single month. Just really focusing on those relationships and growing that, because then at least every month there's X amount of money that is going to come in. And then the rest is just, we have this big gala. So trying to be a little less dependent on events, grants, and a lot more on monthly donors and even legacy gifts. I mean, we just had one of our most faithful supporters passed away very suddenly. I didn't even know at the time, but he left us a legacy gift. And so next year or two, that will be coming in. And so just was interesting. I mean, I always tell people I'm the worst fundraiser in the world. I am not like, still to the 23 years, I'm like, oh, like asking somebody for money is terrible to me. Like I am not, but what I do enjoy doing is just telling the story and then having enough of faith to believe that people will hear the story and respond, that I don't have to convince people. That just feels so gross to me. And there are a lot of nonprofit fund CEOs that are much better fundraisers than I am. And I just feel like I'll just keep telling the story. And somehow we make budget every year. So hopefully that's the legacy I can leave. I would be really sad if I left and the next person was the type that's like, hey, I'm going to promise you a bunch of things, So we call it transformational giving. That by giving to Claris, our goal is that your life would in some way be impacted and not that you're just an ATM machine.
Wow.
And getting out of this mindset of like, in fact, if a donor only just gives you money, then in my mind, in some way, you've sort of failed, because the idea is that you want them to think bigger and feel like they're a part of the story and not just that they just gave you money. So you go do the work, but like, how can they infuse themselves into doing the work as well?
Man, again, there's one more thread, is bringing people together, infusing them into the story. So I'm glad that we got to talk today, because one of the things I do well is I reflect back to people what I see that they don't actually maybe stop to think about, because it's just natural. And I love doing that, because sometimes we can all hear like a little bit about how awesome we are. And I just wanted you to see that, like, you have so many superpowers and it's just part of who you are. And it's really woven into the fabric of the organization. And that's such a gift. That's a really huge gift. Now, what I want to ask you next is, oh my gosh, so you mentioned a campus. Do you have a big project coming up? Was that it? Or is there another one? Like, what's your...
No. Yes. So our big project, our big dream, actually came out of a planning event that we did in 2020. So the height of COVID, our board got together and we did a strategic plan. And this vision came out that actually been birthed many years ago. And I think this is just one example for those of you who are in leadership positions, just the power that happens when we take a back seat, we listen to what those underneath us are saying. And so there had been for years, my team talk about this campus, like this one-stop shop that they envisioned where people could come. And I think part of that is being in LA. And like we said, people come to us and they have so many needs. And how do you meet all the needs? And it's so fragmented, right? Like, okay, so go here for housing and go here for your medical and go here, here, here. And you're giving people on average 6 to 8 referrals. That's what every person that walks in typically needs, 6 to 8 referrals if you walk into a social service agency. So our dream was, how do we eliminate some of those barriers and bring these resources under one roof? And so our big vision right now has been to create a campus where we will invite some of those 320 partners that I mentioned, that we would invite key strategic partners to join us in this campus. And that it'll have a playground, a safe playground. So we want it to be in South LA. So I wanted to be clear on that, because that is where highest need is, but also the most fragmented of all resources. And uniting people. We'll have a safe playground, hopefully basketball court. We want drop-in childcare. So if you need any of the services, so for example, we offer therapy, but it's really difficult to come to a therapy session when you have a 2-year-old. So if you access any services in the campus, that there's free drop-in childcare, and we want a little coffee shop. And so at this point, we have 3 people who've signed agreements to join us in the campus, 3 different organizations, with about 4 to 6 others who are considering it. We just found a property. It's about 2 years of searching. I'm signing a purchase agreement today.
What?
I know,
Today?
hot off the press. Like nobody knows yet.
Woo!
Yeah, so we'll see if it survives. We still have the due diligence, but yeah, it'll be about a 20,000 square foot facility, and our goal is to open it probably at 18 months or so. We're gonna have to start over, but before we've even gone public, we've raised, it's been incredible. I mean, this was such a testimony to me, because the person who hates fundraising, and I think our largest gift prior to this was, I want to say, maybe 200,000. And within just sharing this vision with a few people, we had $10 million raised from 2 families before we even mentioned this. So now we're at 12, we're at about 12 million, and the total project right now is estimated like 21 to 24. So we'll see where we land. But I think what's so exciting, and again, maybe the thread that you have identified, is that this isn't going to be Claris. Like, this isn't a bigger Claris, right? Like, our goal is that Claris is just the stage that brings the players together. I don't know what we're going to call this, but it won't be Claris. It'll have some new name. So.
Wow. I got goosebumps. I love it. I love it. Oh my gosh. So we only have a couple minutes, but I wanted to give you a chance, and I wanted the opportunity to hear your testimony. Know that you personally, not the organization itself, but you personally are faith-based. And did you have a testimony that you could share with us about your walk?
Yeah, so my testimony is interesting. So I grew up as a missionary kid. My parents were, hippies in the 70s, and my dad was in seminary actually here in California when I was born. And when I was 3, and I had an 18-month younger brother, they took us to Amsterdam and joined Youth with a Mission, an organization. And my mom tells me the story. I don't really remember this, but she says we were looking at Time magazine, and it was back in the famine, with Ethiopia. And as I was flipping through, my mom said that I was asking, why do they look so sad, and what is wrong? And through that little conversation, I ended up coming to know Jesus. And so what's really sweet about that story is Africa has always had such a special place in my heart. And I didn't even connect the dots that it's because I had that experience when I was 3 or 4 years old. But now going back, so my parents, were always super encouraging of, which is interesting that my parents, they kind of raised us like, don't do what we did. We went on the mission field. We never had any money. And then here I'm like, oh, I ended up working for a nonprofit, and my dad wanted me to be a lawyer and to do all these big things. But there was that little string, I think, that, was always a part of my life, which was, serving and helping the most needy among us, who, I love the scripture that really just sort of gets our eyes off of basically, getting our eyes onto the least of these, and just the modern day widow and orphan. And I'm constantly like, okay, Lord, who is it that you've placed in front of us? And I do believe that, that there are people in this world who have the most, but from a kingdom perspective, they have the least. And then those who have the least on this earth have the greatest reward in heaven, and the greatest. And I see that especially when you're in Africa. And I think that's part of my legacy of leaving that with my children, is taking them out of this ridiculous comfort zone where they think, my kids, one of my daughters goes to a school where she's like the poor kid. And I'm like, oh my gosh, remember in Uganda, like, I say to my kids all the time, every need everything has been provided for you. There's always food on the table. You are clothed. You go to these good schools. And I think it's helpful to sometimes just shake it up and just be reminded that, when we're in Uganda, my little one, my favorite memory is we were in a village in Uganda, and I look over and she was 5 years old and she had a little staff with her everywhere, and all the little village kids would follow her around, and she's jumping in and out of a trash hole in a village in Uganda. And I've never seen her happier, and playing soccer with little water bottles. And it's just that beauty of like stripping away all of the things that we cling to and just having that relationship. And so anyways, that's a long story. That was my testimony. So then, going through, my parents moved to Oklahoma when I was 13, which was a really difficult. I grew up in Holland and Germany in this very big mindset. And then we moved to Tulsa, Oklahoma, and it was a culture shock in one of the hardest of ways. And I think then going through my own unintended pregnancy and sort of finally having this personal relationship that wasn't based on what people thought of me, but just really he created me to be, and that I am still loved and valued, and not, my life isn't defined by the things that, as you understand, right? The things that we've done don't define us, but they do help give us more empathy for the world around us, and a heart to serve. So that's
What a beautiful story. You are a very special, God made you very special. He makes all of us special, but it's very clear. And it's funny to say that because you're in Claris. Like, it's very clear that who you are, you stand and anchor so much clarity. And the project that you are creating, that's not going to have the name Claris, where it's a platform, the stage for all the players to come to. I can't wait to come to the red ribbon cutting. Any way that I can support that, I will connect you to all the people. I will, everybody, please share this video. If you believe in the vision, share, because that is a way of giving as well, and doing our part to just be the difference in the world. So thank you so much, Talitha. I really appreciate what you're doing in the world and for taking time to share today.
Thank you, Mary. Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everyone.